Hello everybody, welcome to Crafty Soup. My name is Misty. As part of the design team over at the Counterfeit Kit Challenge, I am hosting the activities this month, and we are up for our first layout challenge, which happens to be all about geometrics. And I created this cut file very specifically for this challenge, and it is available for free over on my blog. I will link you up to that so you can get right to that cut file page, and there's one more freebie over there for this month as well. So let's dive into this layout. When I designed the cut file, I did not know what story I wanted to tell, so I flipped through my story binder and I pulled out this nice big photo of flowers in my garden. And so I thought the single photo, big photo would go great with this circle. I did off camera go ahead and cut out all of those shapes. You can see they're individual shapes that you have to kind of pick and choose papers from to cut out, or you can cut them out all of the same thing. It's just up to you how you want to use that cut file. I did want different tones to go with each half of the circle. You could also bump those halves together and kind of create a full circle again. So that is my plan for this layout, is to use that cut file with teals and pinks and do tone on tone half circles. And you can see I've set up my teal side. One of my pieces, I didn't get it lined up properly in the Cricut machine, and it kind of has a flat edge there. I'm going to figure out some way down the road to hide that, cover it up, something. So I'm not too worried about that at this point. I am going through the rest of my counterfeit kit, and if you haven't seen my kit build or don't know what I'm talking about, I will link you up to that. I am choosing a base page for this to go on. Now, this is a pretty busy set of circles, and trying to figure out what it should sit on top of can be tricky. I am going to go ahead and give it some inking so that it does stand out against the background even more, and also against each of its neighbor circles even more. You can see I'm testing it out on this moth print, and you'll see me later. I do experiment with that yellow paper that's off to the side, but I will end up using the moth print because I think the moth print works beautifully for the garden, and I think these circles are less contrasting against the moth print, so I think all of that works out pretty well. All right, I am flipping over all those circles, and I will use some washi tape to tack them all down so that they're one solid piece and I can work with them. You can see that I finished inking all the edges, and here's where I'm testing it out on that yellow print. And I like that idea just because, I had gotten one of my circles mixed up with the other side because they were both teal on one side, and so I'd gotten them mixed up. So I'm putting that pink piece back in place. There we go. Now I've got all my pinks in a row. I did like the idea of this yellow paper because it already has diagonal lines on it, and I thought that is a great leading line to put that split in the circle down that diagonal to my floral. But like I said, it was too much contrast, and I want these circles to be lovely, but I want the flower photo to be the star of the show. So there's always a balance between that, and sometimes I get it wrong, but this time I think I did a great job, and I'm super happy with this layout in the end. So I used a cutoff branding strip to be the spacer between my circles, and that's going to help hold everything together as I continue working. And here I'm fussing with it, trying to figure out how I want to cover up that gap. But in the end, I like this orientation. Now you see me playing with a sheet of vellum. I did want to tone those circles down just a little bit more, and so I pulled out a sheet of 12 by 12 vellum, and I did trim off the edges to make it look like you can see the vellum. It's also going to add another kind of border around the edge. Unfortunately, I cut my vellum just a little bit too small, and parts of the circle are just peeking out over the edges, so I'm doing my best to line everything up. I'm going to tape that vellum down with this washi tape, and I have detacked it on my skin so that I can easily remove it without tearing anything. And with that taped together, now the vellum is my structure to holding those circles together, and I can remove that center strip. Now the place where I tack the vellum to the circles, I'm going to kind of ruffle that up so that I can easily remove it after I've glued everything down, and that's what I'm doing here. I'm sure to add enough glue to the straight edges of these circles so that they will hold nicely in place once I flip this all over. The vellum isn't glued down to those circles yet, so it's a little bit floppy at this point, and I want to make sure that everything can hold down pretty well. So just with a little bit of care and attention, I will get that glued into place. All right, with that yellow paper, I did decide to go ahead and use it. I'm going to use it just as a smidgen of a mat around that photo, and that little bit of yellow really does help the photo pop. And because the yellow is a nice contrast to the things I've got going in the background, that is where that little bit of contrast works. And at this point, I realized I wanted to ink the edges of my vellum, like I said, so that it really reads as more of a border with all of these layers going on. So I will glue my photo to my vellum. And like I said, the vellum isn't glued down yet. So once I glue my photo to my vellum, then I can lift up the edge of that vellum and add glue behind my photo so that you won't see any of that glue through the vellum. It'll be hiding behind the photo. And there I am lifting it up. And I'm just going to put a little bit of glue in place right now, and I will add more under other areas later. And that way I can remove that tape that was holding the vellum in place. I inked on my edges. I made my title. I've pulled out some embellishments that I think I'm going to use, and I want this as my little journaling block. And so as I was moving it around, I thought, aha, that's the piece I need to cover up that, that bad spot in my papers. And so that starts the flow of my clusters. So I'm going to have one at the top. My title will be one in a cluster, and then I will put another one down in the bottom right corner. So with that little journaling tag, that starts the rest of the flow of my paper, because up to this point, the only idea I had was those circles and the photo. All right, I made a spelling mistake in my title. Maybe you noticed. And my husband actually came in and said, hey, that's spelled wrong. And I was like, oh, yeah, you're right. So I fixed it. And now I am starting to, I narrowed down some of my embellishments, and I'm starting to build my clusters. Now, when I started pulling out embellishments, I really did think I wanted those to be underneath the vellum also, because I was worried they were going to detract too much from the photo, but they really got too lost under the vellum. They were blending in too much, and you can see some of that here by my title, how I put it underneath the vellum, and they were blending in too much with the circle, so each of the elements wasn't holding its own. So I did pull those up to the top, and actually I think they are doing a great job of supporting the flower without detracting from the flower. So I'm adding little bits and pieces here to my clusters to try and just make everything flow how I want it. I'm sure to have some movement going on in my clusters with uneven edges that kind of help the eye flow around things, and covering up any awkward gaps with other little bits and pieces. Now, I did put one element behind the vellum because it was a bright magenta color, which didn't go with the other elements that I had. And that softened it up just enough that it fits in with everything else. So the vellum did come in handy for that in the end. All right, and I'm adding a few sprinkles of finishing touches with some enamel hearts, and I am so pleased with how this turned out. I think the only thing that I would change was having a slightly less thick vellum, because it is muting those circles down more than I had envisioned, but I'm using what I've got. So in the end, I am definitely pleased with this one. And I'm leaving you with some close-ups of all of those lovely bits and pieces. And I want to thank you so much for being here and for watching. I hope I have inspired you with something that I've shared today. And I encourage you to join us over at the Counterfeit Kit Challenge so that you can put these challenges to use in your scrappy world. All right, until next time, I hope you have an artful day.